Once upon a time, when the king fell seriously ill without any known cause, the royal court was in turmoil as no one knew what had befallen the always robust king. Suddenly, he would collapse in pain, and the king, who was always strong, had a high fever and a red face, unable to rise from his bed. However, he could still eat and drink normally. Despite the expertise of 10 royal physicians, they could not diagnose the illness as no one was familiar with such a disease. Thus, the king decided to sentence all 10 physicians to death, since they were unable to cure him. Frustrated and fearful of being accused or sentenced to death, none of the doctors dared to treat the king, so they abandoned their medical profession and went into hiding. But there were still 2 renowned doctors who had not escaped into hiding. Perhaps their reputation was so great that they couldn't conceal themselves. One of these esteemed doctors was living a life of poverty despite his skills. He continued to search and study further, not demanding anything if the treatment failed. However, if it worked, the patient would recover. The relatives admired his efforts. Yet, when he examined the king, he found nothing abnormal. The king was even healthier than an ordinary person. The doctor then informed the king, and immediately the king ordered his guards to execute the doctor. As for the other famous doctor who attended to the king, he had a pale face, much like that of a ghost. This doctor had never read a book or studied anything. However, he chose to treat only those who were not seriously ill, those who had money, and those who were not elderly. He told the king to open his mouth, and then he snapped his fingers. He said, "The king is truly sick, but the treatment is very simple." He advised the king to find the shirt of someone who was happy all the time, wear it to sleep for one night, and then he would recover. The doctor confirmed this. Immediately, the king ordered the troops to find that shirt before dusk. The soldiers spread out in all directions, searching for the shirt of eternal happiness. Some soldiers went to ask a wealthy tycoon, who was abundantly rich with a huge mansion and 100 servants. But even the tycoon or any other magnate could never claim to be happy all the time. Not even a moment of true happiness could ever exist. All the tycoons said the same thing. Some soldiers went to meet a high-ranking government official and a person of great honor, hoping that their honor and positions might bring them benefits and privileges. However, they only found people with solemn faces. They wondered what could make them happy, since they already considered themselves fortunate just to have a life each day. They could never know when the king would issue an execution order. One of the government officials' fathers had advised them that there was only one profession to avoid if they wanted to escape from various occupations, and that was working close to the king. But the government officials didn't believe it, and now they realized that they couldn't withdraw. If they resigned, they would die. If they didn't resign, they would also die. So how could they find happiness in such a situation? Some soldiers went to find the monks who had fled to the forest in search of solitude and meditation. They thought that the monks would be the happiest people in the world. But no matter what monk or priest they asked, they all answered the same. "If I were happy, why would I come here to torture myself physically and mentally? I am only in pain, so I am trying to escape myself." The soldiers journeyed to various places, but they couldn't find anyone who was truly happy. Religious practitioners were not happy. Teachers and professors were not happy. Poets and musicians were not happy unless they were writing poetry or playing music. Even those who roamed around indulging in poetry and music to the extent of neglecting their livelihoods were not happy. People had to live within their communities. They had to work to find sustenance. Yet, no matter when people had to work for their livelihoods, they could not find true happiness. As time passed, it became evident that the soldiers had not encountered a single person who could claim to be happy all the time. Finally, the soldiers ran out of ideas and returned to the city. Suddenly, they heard a song of happiness echoing through the main streets of the city. It sounded as if the singer was filled with joy. Everyone followed the sound and found a beggar with a disabled body sitting, singing, and laughing. The soldiers surrounded the beggar, but apart from his tattered half-leafed loincloth and a few pennies in his pocket, he had no possessions left, and not even a shred of colorful cloth to see. But this beggar, the happiest man, didn't even have a shirt to wear. Everyone shouted and asked if he was the happiest man for sure. He replied firmly that he was the happiest because he had only happiness and no sorrows. No matter what suffering, he couldn't pass it down to the next life. He was perfectly happy, and no one, be it a king, a rich person, a government official, a teacher, a poet, or a musician, could ever compare to him in terms of happiness. In the end, all the soldiers were at a loss. They led the beggar back into the city, and at that very moment, the sound of the song of eternal happiness rang through the city. Listening to this story, I am reminded of the doctor who advised the king to find a shirt to sleep in one night. I'm not sure if the doctor knew a way to cure, or was simply playing a trick to save himself from being executed. So he shifted the blame to the soldiers. He knew that the shirt of eternal happiness didn't really exist, so he asked for something that didn't exist. If the soldiers couldn't find it, it wouldn't be the doctor's fault. The true lesson of this story is that everyone experiences suffering in life, but the nature of that suffering differs for each person. As children, we might think that growing up means we will be happier because we won't be controlled by adults. However, as adults, we sometimes wish to go back to being children because we realize that when we were kids, we didn't have as many responsibilities as adults. Life is a delicate balance, and it's not the same as when we were children, where we had a degree of freedom and didn't have to struggle to make a living.
Thank you for watching. May you have peace and prosperity, and may all your wishes come true.